Welcome to the New Bedford Light Fine Arts Club. Yay! Woohoo! Thank you all for coming out on this very wet, somewhat stormy first night of autumn. Really appreciate your being here. I am Bobby Rossner. I am the founding editor of the New Bedford Light. And I hope you all know that we are a free, nonprofit, all-digital news outlet based here in New Bedford. Actually, our newsroom is at that other mill in the South End. Hey, how you doing? And we are very much a news outlet. We dig deep into complex, tough issues of housing and schools and healthcare and many other things that the city of New Bedford is facing. And we work hard to do really hard-hitting investigative and explanatory reporting. And some people have wondered why a news organization like ours would be holding a fine arts club. And that's a good question. But to us, it's the most natural thing in the world for a couple of reasons. The arts are, as we all know, essential to the identity of New Bedford. And because we at the Light are committed to reflecting the whole of the city, not just officialdom and not just people in power, the arts are really essential to our journalistic mission. So we are a very unusual news organization. We are an invention. We started from scratch. A bunch of people got together and said, local news is going down the tubes in New Bedford, we're gonna bring it back. And because we're starting from scratch and we're creative types, we've just fashioned our own kind of news outlet. And I don't know that anybody else in the country is doing this. We investigate issues and we celebrate culture. And it's been a very, very interesting phenomenon. And people are really taken with it, which is wonderful. Another reason why it makes sense to us to cover the arts the way we do. When you get right down to it, journalists are storytellers and artists are too. We are connected through our passion for telling stories that are meaningful, that are true, and that resonate with the people around us and the place around us. So as you watch tonight's artists describe their work, I think you'll agree that their art does all of that storytelling and much more. It's fascinating to hear people talk, to hear artists talk about where their work comes from and what they're trying to accomplish with it. So we have a new host tonight, Taylor Hickey, and Devin McLaughlin is not here because he lost his voice. So we're very happy to have Taylor, and before I introduce her, I just want to say thank you, huge thanks to Jeff Glassman for hosting us this evening at Hatch Street. Just a very cool thing. And also thank you to My Biz Media for providing the mics and the PA system and donating the lighting and the video recording as well. Yes. As a nonprofit, we love donations. And that's how we keep our content absolutely free, which we think is very, very important to the people of New Bedford and the surrounding area. So heartfelt thanks to the community that generously supports us in so many ways, including tonight. So Taylor is a printmaker, a bookmaker, and a sculptor working out of New Bedford. She was born in Southeast Texas. She earned her BA in drawing and printmaking from McNeese State University in Louisiana. And she went on to earn an MFA in printmaking from UMass Dartmouth in 2021. So she's gonna host the show tonight. And I'm gonna turn it over to Taylor. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Bobby, and thank you all for coming out. I think it was Dimitri Martin that said, thanks for going to a thing, because it is 100% easier than not going to a thing. So we appreciate you coming out, braving the weather, and joining us for New Bedford Fine Arts Club. New Bedford Light Fine Arts Club. Sorry. Make sure you grab a program from the table up front. It's got a list of all of our artists tonight, all of their contact information, and a QR code on the front, which you can scan with your phone camera and find out more about New Bedford Light, join the email list, etc. But anyways, without further ado, I'm going to get right into our artist. Each artist is going to take about 5 minutes to present, speak a little bit about their work that they've brought here to show you today. And then we'll open it up for some questions. If you are in the audience and you have a question, just raise your hand. We can bring you a mic, or you can just yell out your question and I'll repeat it louder so everyone can hear. We're going to start off the night with Duvall Skerritt.
Hello everyone, my name is Duvall Skerritt. I'm a graphic designer, illustrator, and fine artist from Taunton, Massachusetts, and I'll talk a little bit about this specific piece. This is actually my daughter. This was actually originally a photo assignment when I was at Bristol Community College, and it was supposed to be so that it's one single light source, and basically how the light source and the shadows can conform and create shape. So I like the picture a lot, so then I actually used the grid system and I transferred it from the picture to the canvas. This is one of my first oil paintings, so this is kind of a new medium for me. Getting the skin tone was a little challenging, but I'm relatively pleased with it. I think I was relatively successful with the contours on the shadows kind of wrapped around to get a form of the shape. So I really enjoyed it. And a little bit of funny story behind this. I have quite a few children. Halfway, about 10 to 12 hours into it, I walked away, came back, and it was all smeared. Yeah, so I had to almost like restart this whole thing again. So it has a lot of meaning to me personally, how many hours I put into this. So, but yes, that's, we call it locks, and my daughter's known for her locks and her huge hair when she enters the room. So that's that. This is the same situation. This started off in a sketchbook. I do a lot of caricatures, elongated figures, huge heads. I do a lot of that kind of stuff. That's what I really enjoy. I read a lot of comic books growing up, so I kind of got my style from that. And two of my absolute favorite NBA players, and this is kind of an iconic moment when kind of like Jordan was on his way out and Kobe was coming into the league, so it was a huge, if you just look it up, you pretty much see this is one of the main pictures that's going to come up if you reference that kind of that era. I think this was like in '97, like maybe the third time they met. It was an incredible game, but so I just exaggerated a lot of the features and the extra long arms and things like that. That's kind of like a stylized type of drawing that I do. Same situation. It was started off as a sketchbook, and I transferred it to the campus by grid system. And so I'm still learning a lot about this is a few years ago that I actually did this though, but so I'm still learning regarding light and color and form, and it's such an interesting, oil paint is such a different medium than I'm used to. I'm usually just drawing, sketching, Adobe Illustrator, stuff like that. So this was it was a real challenge, both of these, but I've strayed away from it from a long time, and I'm now, I'd say within the last month or so, I'm really looking to get back into fine art and not so much logo making and t-shirts and stuff like that. So being here with all these artists and like-minded people is really it's very inspiring. So that's about it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but that's my presentation for you.
All right, thank you, Duvall. I don't see any questions from the audience right now, but I do have a question for you. So you mentioned, I think on your website, that you have some other artists in your family that kind of inspired you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
So, yes, my aunt, Fruci Cunningham, she was one of the first Black artists to get a commission to do sculpture in Boston. So she actually has quite a few sculptures, Mattapan Square, the Park School in Brookline. I want to say, there's quite a few different places, but so I would go to my cousin's house growing up, and I was always surrounded by like this beautiful artwork that depicted my people as being beautiful and intelligent, because we don't always see them that way. So it was really good to be around that kind of culture, so that really inspired me. She's also a teacher at the Park School, and she passed away a couple of years ago, but she was a huge inspiration to me, like growing up.
Awesome. And then, did you have any social media, any website you'd like to mention? I think you were Infinite Design and Illustration.
I do. It's IDIgraphics.com. That's my website. I have a lot of personal works on there. I do need to update it, but I do have some things on there that
Great.
after the show.
Yeah, I saw some good stuff, and that is in our program as well, so you can look Duvall up there. And any other questions from our audience?
How long did it take you to finish the painting of your daughter once it had been smeared?
So that's how long did that painting take post-smearing?
I wasn't keeping track, but I would do a little. It was tough because I was not in a great space as far as where I could work on the art. So I was working on that kitchen table, and I would leave it, and then that's obviously what things happen, right, with kids. So then I couldn't touch it until the next day. So it would be an hour here, the next day an hour. So it was a long time. I want to say total, it was about 27 hours, just like off and on. Because every time I went back, the paint was dry. So I had to like mix a new batch and try to make it the same exact color. It was very difficult. That's why it took so long. But I want to say that was close to 27 hours on that one. Yeah.
It shows. Wonderful piece. Beautiful. All right, so next up we have David Walega. Is that how you pronounce it? Walliger. David Walliger. And David has a show right now at Gallery X, Tiny Poems Everywhere. So definitely check that out next time you're in downtown New Bedford.
Gallery X is awesome.
Gallery X is awesome. I think we have quite a few artists tonight who are showing or frequently show at Gallery X. It's a great venue. Highly recommend.
So hi everybody, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that New Bedford Light is here. It's long story short is I grew up in Massachusetts and I left when I was 18 thinking there was nothing to go back to, and I moved back during COVID, and I was so delighted that there's an arts community, things are happening in New Bedford. It was just unbelievable that I'm staying now. You know, it's like I never thought that this would be a place that I could actually have so much stimulation with other artists and that sort of thing. So I'm really happy to be here. So thank you for having these kind of venues and these kind of events. So I basically cut my teeth on photojournalism in my 20s. I was working for a bunch of organizations like UNICEF and going into war zones and working with homeless folks and different things like that. And really burned out really quickly as far as just, I mean, I continued to work, but I just needed something that was all my own. And I discovered a Pinhole Camera. So basically these are images from a Pinhole Camera that is a simple wooden box. And when I say it's a Pinhole Camera, it's literally like you open it up, there is a pinhole, and it exposes the film in the back. So the exposures can be anywhere from like 30 seconds to like hours, depending on the light. And I've just sort of intuitively After 20 years of doing it, I understand like how much light I need. But there's no viewfinder, there's no nothing. So you just understand after a lot of mess ups how long and where to point the camera. So Lincoln Park was a place as a youth I used to go all the time, and when it was closed, of course it was just like photographer's dream to break in and take photographs. So I was crawling all over the roller coaster and taking photos, knowing that any second a security guard might kick me out, right? So I climbed up all over it. Wasn't it the Comet? Wasn't it called the Comet? But I was crawling all over it, and this is just one of several, but this is one of the ones that really made me happy because of the exposure and the movement, and it just captures that idea of a wooden roller coaster. It was horrifying because it was wooden. It could fall down at any moment. So this is just nostalgic, but it also shows like what you can actually do with a simple wooden box. You know, it's just sort of like, this goes back to there are scrolls in China like centuries ago of people using a whole room and putting a pinhole in the wall and being able to draw structures and things like that and get a sense of architecture and such before there was even an idea of lenses being able to refract light. So it's centuries old analog technology, and I took it on as my goal to make it my own. You know, so it's not a gimmick, it's not an Instagram filter. This is the real deal. And so the second photo up to the left is I used to visit LA and then I moved there, but Hollywood and the Hollywood system has so many strange and wonderful people involved in it, but outside Man's Chinese Theater are these people that dress up in different outfits. It was like Michael Jackson and Marilyn Monroe and all these different people, but Batman was there, and I gave him $5 to stand still for 30 seconds, knowing that, in 30 seconds, that's why there is so much movement in his wings, is that the wind was moving his capes and his wings around, and that's what gives it that sort of strange aura or look to him. And that's what's so great about the Pinhole Camera, is that since there is such a long exposure, the light just kind of envelops your subject. It's really an amazing thing where the lens in a normal camera distributes the light so it's equal, but in a pinhole camera it begins in the middle and burns its way out. So it's always just an amazing thing to get back to film, because you do not know what you're going to get, but at this point I kind of intuitively know what I'm going to get. So I'm just very proud and happy to have this work, and it's my way of having a sort of meditative outlet, where the photojournalism and the working in Africa and displaced peoples was very hardcore and interesting and draining. This is my meditative sort of work that I go to when I need a break from my other work. So to me, it's every time an image comes out the way I wanted to, or better than I wanted to, it's always a celebration. So, yeah, so that's great.
Wonderful work, David. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, make sure to check that out at Gallery X, Tiny Poems Everywhere. And check out the program for more of David's contact info. Sorry, did you have a question?
These particular prints are not silver gelatin prints, but the originals that I did that were very small were silver gelatin prints. So if you go see the show at Gallery X until October 2nd, I think, most of them are silver gelatin prints, but to blow them up this big is a digital file, because it's like, I did that like 10 years ago. I blew a bunch of these things in my bathroom, in the shower. I was dripping in chemistry. It was horrible. So now with digital photography, you can blow them up this big. Yeah.
How big is your negative?
So it's literally 4x5. So like I have an 8x10 camera and a 4x5, but the negative is literally this So it's a nice large negative. So you have a lot to work with. And then the 8x10s are beautiful too. So when they don't work out, it really sucks because it costs a lot of money and a lot of time and effort. But when it works out, it's super, like, you know, it just feels really, really good when you get it.
The camera, or did you make the camera?
I actually bought this one. I have made ones in the past, but just having things that work and can clamp down was more important to me at that point than building ones myself, because I have built ones myself.
I've read a Pinhole Camera before, but I know nothing about them. What do you do? Just slide that shutter?
Yes, this is a film holder, and when you open it up, it reveals the film,
Yeah.
and then you just slide it shut. And this is, the exposure is, I just sort of know on top of my head nowadays, if it's 400 ASA film, it's going to be 30 seconds, 1, 2, and I just count it out, and then...
That's what you're using 400 feet for?
Usually, yeah. Yeah. So even in low light, I get something.
I have 2 questions. Where do you get your film? And the second question is, what is your subject matter moving forward?
So where I get my film is B&H Film in New York still has 4x5 and 8x10, and there's another place in Providence, I can't think of the name right now, but you can. The hard part is getting it developed because I don't have a darkroom anymore. So there's a few places that still develop negatives that big, I mean an 8x10 negative. And my subjects moving forward is I'm trying to do a portrait of the Mattapoisett River, because that's where I'm from, is Mattapoisett. And I've actually had a kayak, and I put my tripod. You have to have a tripod because you have to hold the camera still. But still, the kayak moves with the motion of the waves. So I'm getting these really atmospheric, beautiful photographs that just have this sense of the river and the nature around it. But yeah, they sort of like, you have to embrace the weirdness of the change, you know, so, because you don't have any control over it, so.
That sounds super cool. I'm very excited to see those. Thank you all for your brilliant questions. And please, if you have any more questions, hang on to them, because we're going to have about 30 minutes after our presentations for you to just hang out and mingle with the artists, ask them whatever you want to know, have a better look at that pinhole camera. But next up, we've got Paulina Fuenzalida Guzman. She is a fiber artist. She's also one of my buddies from UMass.
I wish to tell you that I'm born in Santiago, the capital of Chile, South America, a very long and very contradictory country. These pieces try to represent this spirit of contradiction. The north of my country is very dry. We have the most dry desert in the world, Atacama Desert. And also, all our country is connected with the Pacific Ocean. And when I was studying in UMass Dartmouth, my mother was very sick. No, oh, sorry, I forgot the word. She was very bad. She had cancer. And during this time, I couldn't go to my country, and I thought, oh, I miss something. I miss my roots. I miss the earth, I miss the sea, and also, well, my mother. And I create these pieces that try to represent this feeling. And also these pieces represent the fragment. All we are, in some way, fragment people. We are part of something more big, a whole. And with the fibers, I try to connect. I try to connect with the people, with the situation of each people. And I wish to do echoes of the words of Bobby, that she said, art tells story. And for me, it's so important because I have a background like an interior design and a journalist. And for me, it's so important to tell story. Each person is so important. Each person makes the world. And we can make a beautiful world if we want. And the art for me is trying to reflect this spirit, this idea, to connect with the people, connect with the suffering, and also with the happiness and all the things that happen of each of us. And why I use the hair of the sheep, for me is something related with the neurons. I thought or I think about the fibers are very small and thin material that in the same way they are connected, and they are building a whole, something big. Each one connect with themselves and build something more big. This is my art in general. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. How do you connect these pieces of the fabric?
Oh,
Right.
they are support in a cotton gauze. All the natural material, there are kind of little connector, if you can say that they mix together. If I use plastic or polymer, that not work. I need to use silk, cotton, sheep, all these kind of natural fibers. They are really connect themselves. And this technique, I separate with plastic, and then I cut and appear this fragment. Thank you.
Any other questions from our audience? Paulina? Oh.
Would you ever consider backlighting them? Because, you know, with the layers, it might be really interesting to see the thinness and stuff, but do you think that would be gimmicky? Do you know what I mean? Would you ever put light behind it?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a good question. There's a lot of different qualities that you work with, even though you do work with all natural materials and a lot of felt. There's like differences in transparency, and I've also seen you hang this work in different ways. So some of them are wall mounted, but you've had some pieces that are suspended, like in the center of a room. So like the Cord of Life, that was a beautiful piece.
Yeah. Oh well.
No, it's okay. If you want to talk about that piece,
Yeah. Well, in the process when my mother was very sick, then I had the notice that she died, and in this moment I feel a kind of disconnection of my ancestors, also with my mother, and I feel lost in the life, without root, without nothing. It was like alone, and create this big wound. I use the gallery, has a big room, and inside that room, small room that support faces, bodies, and try to connect the idea that the ancestors, we are connected again, all together. Ancestors, our generation, and the future generation. And cord of life is the umbilical cord that represents the idea of life.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paulina. And again, if you look in the program, you can find our artists on social media. You can find their websites. I would highly recommend looking at their work, just so you can see more of a variety of it, more images. Next up, we've got Eileen Riley.
Okay, so I'm Eileen, and I like to tell stories. So I brought a fictional story and a non-fictional story with me tonight. And I'll start off with my she-wolf. What I like to do is to, I do people too, but I like to do animals. I like to find out what they symbolize and work off of that. So what I found out about the wolf was that she is a very revered spirit animal by the Native Americans. So I put some Native Americans in here. So this is my fictional story, and basically what I'm telling is a story about the she-wolf and how she's the mother of all dogs. And on the left-hand side of the canvas, I have a ballet that is going on that speaks about that. And if you look on the top of her head, I have two angels guiding some ducks, and they're making a crown on her head. And I think of her as being the queen of the forest. And basically, I made this story up by piecing together little pieces of stories that I read on the internet about wolves. And what I came up with was that when she howls, the flowers bloom. So, and you can see the ballerinas here, and there's a mother with her children, because I also read about the story about Romulus and Remus, who went on to find Rome, and the story is that they were suckled by a she-wolf. And so I put in all of the milkmaids with the children. So that's basically it on this one. Then I now have put a golden aura around her. And then I have the heart chakra. Now this is a true story. The panda represents the heart chakra. And this was happening, I did both of these last year, and this was happening at a time when we were having difficulties with our nation, when we were separated, divided. So that's why I put the heart in here with that separated in the middle. But I have a happy couple coming out of the middle, which is love conquers all. And then I put, this one happened, it was a strange thing because it happened before I went on a trip to California. And on my trip to California, I found out that I had to have open heart surgery. So it was strange that I was working on this piece, and it became very personal to me to finish this piece after I found out that information. So I feel like I tell these stories, but there's one story that is the obvious story, but then there's also a story about me in some of the papers that I use. So they're just like receipts from things that I buy, and this all started off, my mother and father moved from Westport to Lakeville, and my dad had a whole bunch of National Geographic magazines. And so I started using those, and this is what's developed since then.
All right, so I'll take any questions from our audience. I also do have a question for you. I'm curious what terminology you like best for your pieces, whether it's like mixed media, collage, cut paper.
I like multimedia.
Multimedia, okay.
Because I do sculpture as well.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Very fascinating. I love the story of the heart chakra one. That's really interesting. What is it they say? Life imitates art.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right.
The flowers and the she-wolf.
Mm-hmm. I make those, yes. Crepe paper.
Okay, so the question was about the flowers, and Eileen, you said you made those yourself. Yes, with crepe paper. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yes.
I don't know the name again. What is she?
Which one?
The bear.
I was thinking the cannon piece where there is a woodpecker.
Oh, wait. Okay, so let's take this question first. What was your question, sir?
Yes, I was curious about the name and what the background. What is the name? I'm not clear on.
On the panda?
Yes.
The panda, when I looked up information about the panda, what I found out was that the panda represents the heart chakra, which is the space, their chakras that they use in yoga, I guess. So it represents the heart.
Mm-hmm. All right, and our question back here?
Oh, I was just happening in front of class in Roman civilization, the sheep.
Yes.
Marvelous story. I was just wondering, did you, well, of course they say there's like a woodpecker that would fly by and drop berries to feed them. It seems like it's a cumulatory piece, I just know. The woodpecker.
Yeah, yeah.
The truth, but yeah, wrong is fast. But yeah, that was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome work. And yeah, I feel like this is one of those things where you can sort of find a lot of meaning depending on who you are, your walk of life. Like, there's so many little things, little details. When you look into there, you can just find an abundance of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. All right, next up we have Donald Fruci. I hope I'm saying that right. Please correct me. All right, Donald Fruci.
So I'm kind of new at this, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to read, okay? So good evening, my name is Donald Fruci. I'd like to thank the club for inviting me to show my work here tonight. This is the first time I've actually shown my work publicly. And I also like to thank my partner, Greg Marshall, who's here with me, and who's an artist in his own right and has endured me for 25 years. So. My artwork now touches on photography, painting, pottery, and sculpture. Here we have an example of photography and painting. I have two artist statements I'd like to share. They suggest my philosophy depending on my mood. One of them is soft, and one of them is harsh and defensive. Both are arrogant, I'll tell you that. And you can choose the one that resonates for you. So I think that art should startle us awake so that our reality is redefined, if only for a moment in time. Sometimes that awakening is to the sublime, and sometimes it's to the uncomfortable or sordid. When we walk away, we should want to take one more look over our shoulder, and we should be forever changed, even if we cannot say how or why, and the world will never be quite the same to us ever again. That's the good one. The other one, the defensive one, is I want people I want to make people say about my art derivative. Well, what is that? What the F is that? My 3-year-old could do that. Then I want them to walk away in disgust, not even realizing that their notion of the world will never be the same, even if that notion simply reinforces their own perceived superiority. So that's my little defensive statement. Anyway, my whole aim of art is take the ordinary and see it in an extraordinary way. To redefine reality, really. And both statements lead to an awakening for myself and hopefully for you viewers as well. I'm not an artist by training. I've probably been everything else in life except an artist. I've been a technical writer. I've been an editor, an accountant, a software consultant, and a technology manager. As an aside, I was an English major. So for those of you who were in the humanities, don't despair. There's room out there for us all. But through all that big business stuff, I always had something a little bit more creative going on in the background. And as a matter of fact, I sort of think that we make this artificial gap between business and art, because I think they rely on similar talents. Analysis, problem solving, creating order out of chaos. So I don't think they're as far apart as we pretend they are. So that's enough of my rambling, I guess. So let's start with the art itself. I think I'd like to start with the photograph. When it comes to photography, I try to look at the familiar in different ways. Most of my photographs are taken in situ. So I don't stage them. This is a little bit of an exception. My partner Greg was working on a collection of things for one of his art classes, and I kind of stole the image from him. So I just simply took the picture and cropped it. Now I brought up pictures with me that I didn't bring up, but what's that? Esoteric. So that I didn't bring up. What really started it, I was walking through Buttonwood Park in the autumn, and there was a piece of toast in the middle of the park, and I took a picture of it. I said, you know, how strange, accidental art. And then I was at the Stewart Medical Center, and stuck in the bushes was a big piece of cardboard that somebody lidded. It said, "Do not discard." So it was like, so that's kind of how the photography evolved. And I also want to add that I'm not an expert with the Pinhole Camera, but none of my work is manipulated with really high-tech photo editors. Matter of fact, they've all been taken with an old iPhone that still even has a home button on it. So, and I think it does a pretty good job. And when it comes to painting, which brings us over to the dove, I'm not quite sure how to label myself here. An intuitive, abstract colorist. I'm never quite sure exactly what I'm painting. I'm really very cheap. So what happens is, whatever colors are left over on my palette from my previous painting becomes the background for the next painting I'm doing. So it's almost accidental. I just like the colors talk to me. And as I said, I hate to waste paint. So I think that's about all I have to say. I probably talked a little bit more than I should and read a little bit more than I should. But I'd like to invite you to ask questions of the art or any of the comments that I made. I'm going to warn you, though, since I rely on intuition, I might not have full answers, and I might even lie to you. Because I am ruled by gut more than intellect when it comes to the art.
All right.
And the only other thing I ask is, please don't throw tomatoes because it'll get messy for the next ads that comes up here.
All right. Thank you, Donald. If anyone has a quick question for Donald, we can maybe take one.
I do have the book here, but well, yeah, maybe afterwards.
Yeah, stick around afterwards. If anyone has any more questions, for the sake of time, I think we ought to move on to our next person. But it was great having you. And again, stick around for questions, see more of the work. Love to see it. All right. Next up, we have Donna Gagnon. Is that correct? Gagnon? Donna Gagnon, thank you.
Nice to be here with so many talented artists. It's such a nice variety in this show. It's a nice show. Now, can you hear me now? Anyway, I grew up in Fairhaven and all the beauty of downtown Fairhaven and the waterfront and the beaches. So I grew up with a clear love of architecture and outdoors, especially the ocean. I could never live away from the ocean. I do seascapes, landscapes, but I also do portraits of people and pets. And yeah, people, places, and pets is what I really do. But today I picked these two paintings because of the New Bedford light, and I have lights in two of these two paintings. I was coming out of the Bejeweled shop on Center Street after buying a gift for my granddaughter who graduated from college. And when I came out of the door and headed up Center Street, the cupola of the Whaling Museum hit me in the face, and I went, oh, look at the light. And then there was the other light, the street light, which is iconic to New Bedford. And then all the buildings, and I just said, I have to paint that. So I took pictures and pictures, and it was so much fun to paint that. And the other one was from a photograph of a friend that a friend took, and I always ask permission, but he gave me permission. And what struck me of this was it had snowed, and as you know, when the wind blows through the tree branches, the little snowflakes come down, and when the light was shining through the trees, it was just sparkling, and I said, oh, gotta do that. So I added the little animals in there because I wanted a sense of peace and calm and serenity, because the world's much too chaotic for me, and I tend to paint things in life the way I wish it was rather than what it really is. I have too much reality, so I really like the peaceful things. I got a nice background growing up, going to Swain School as a kid and UMass Dartmouth, and I worked in advertising and marketing, sales. I did drafting, illustration, a lot of things, and plus mundane jobs to pay the bills. So it was really nice after I retired to be able to concentrate on doing fun things, and this really kept my sanity during COVID lockdown. It was nice to have something, an outlet to do. So if there are any questions, yes?
On the Center Street, did you sit on Center Street with your easel for days on end, or did you take a photograph?
I took a photograph with my iPhone. And several, because I wanted to try different angles, but I liked the way the angles of the buildings all pointed to the cupola, which was,
very nice.
The sunlight was so good that day. It just went, you know, and that's what I like to do, is get the light and the shadow and the contrast and all that.
You captured it beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
I live really close to there. It's a beautiful walk home from the bar. Christine.
It is. Lovely work, guys. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from our audience? All right. So next up, we have Kaylin Pacheco. Kaylin is a digital photographer specializing in portraits.
Anyway, my name is Kaylin Pacheco, and I have my own photography business called Mayfire Photography. This is the first time I'm ever presenting my work besides social media, so I want to thank Lighthouse, I want to thank the New Bedford Light for having me. I want to start off by telling you guys a little bit about myself. So, I have notes. So I'm that type of person who will plan every part of a vacation. I'll research everything into oblivion until there are no more surprises. For example, I was recently asked to a restaurant by a friend, and I had never been to that restaurant before, so I hopped onto Google and I looked at the menu, which is pretty normal, but then I saw that it was an outdoor restaurant, and so I looked at the weather to see what I was going to wear, but then how fancy is this place, and what am I exactly going to be wearing? Am I going to be warm enough? Am I going to be cold enough? You know. And before I knew it, I was on Instagram looking at stranger selfies from the last weekend of people who had posted and luckily tagged their locations so I can experience this place before I'd ever even experienced it for myself. So, I have a bit of a control problem. So when it comes to creating art, you'd think I would treat it the same way, but there's something therapeutic about letting go. There's a style of writing that I can relate to when it comes to creating art, and it's called discovery writing. Now, discovery writing is when you sit down with your characters in mind and you let them tell the story for you. These writers are so in tune with their characters that they come off very naturally on the page. The opposite of that would be an outliner, which I imagine as a puppeteer who has total control of the story by telling their characters exactly what to do. And when it comes to my creative portraits, there's very little planning that goes into it. I'll schedule a model and have a very vague location in mind, and I'll also collect random pieces that are interesting to me and bring them along with me. But until I'm there and I have all the pieces in front of me, I don't know what story they will tell. If I were one of my models, I think I would panic at the first sign of, I don't know, we'll see when we get there. But Jody, who is in both of those photos, and you can see on your pamphlet, me and Jody are always on the same page. Jody is everything I wish I could be. She's brave and spontaneous and really open and ready for whatever. And the first photo here is from the first time I ever met her. She met me at my previous studio space in the Narrows in Fall River with a pile of clothes that we could choose from and an unmatched energy. We had wandered around and ended up using the backspace of the Narrows that really hadn't been touched in years, and I love the colors of the walls and just the overall contrast between the elegance of Jody and the decay surrounding her. The next photograph, this one right here, was shot a few years later after Jody had moved to New York to work full-time as a model. I had taken the bus to the city with a camera and zero plan. That evening, Jody told me she was friends with an owner of a nightclub and they were gonna let us in to take a few shots before they opened for the night. And for the first time, not having a plan made me very nervous. I generally work with natural lighting, which is something you don't see in a nightclub. But if I had meticulously planned my trip, I don't think I would have gotten this photo of Jody with gold leaf on her hands we had found in a craft store a few hours before, finding a random phone booth on the second floor of a nightclub that had been perfectly lit overhead by a yellow light and with a hazy glow from a drugstore stocking wrapped around my lens. Now, overall, I don't think you can tell that Game of Thrones and The Shining were written by discovery writers. But once you hear an artist describe their process, it adds a whole new layer to the finished piece. And so thank you for letting me tell me my story.
Fantastic work, Kaylin. Thank you so much for sharing about your process and your sense of spontaneity.
Yeah. As you can see, I treated this like, not like I treat my art. So.
More like the restaurant.
Very outlined.
All right, so we have time to take a question from our audience, I think. Other than that, hold it for the end. Stick around for the afterglow. Yes?
Do you know your subjects? Do you know your...
I meet them here and there. Sometimes they will contact me through Instagram and they'll want to work with me. But Jody, I think Jody, she had reached out to me and I had no idea who she was. And so I was like, yeah, come on by my studio. And from there, we really clicked, and I've used her multiple times in different creative portraits, and I don't know, they just turn out to be my favorite photographs. We work very well together. I think it's just us being so opposite, but then coming together, and we're on the same page, you know? Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Tammy Meehan. Hi, did I say that? Tammy Meehan.
Hi, my name is Tammy Meehan. I have a studio here at Half Street, actually right behind this wall. So it's kind of exciting to be here. I'm kind of new to the New Bedford scene. I got a studio in like 2019. For the past 12 years, I've been working on my career building a practice as a psychotherapist. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because a lot of my work now is kind of influenced by psychology. So sorry, I'm really nervous. I don't often talk in front of people like this. First one is cell song. A lot of my work is just kind of go with the flow, intuitive. I get really into the process, and I start with ideas kind of about things. And I was thinking a lot about energy, and so there's kind of like some swirls representing energy or cells, and it became more about sort of like this vibrational, the way cells kind of vibrate, and so I'm into a lot of different stuff, like just kind of like physics, frequencies. I'm going to go back just a little bit. In 2020, I started meditating on a daily basis. And so I became more and more involved with sort of like, just kind of attempting to be a little bit more sort of spiritually centered and aligned, and doing some Kundalini yoga and getting into just kind of energy, basically. And so one of the practices in yoga is kind of like aligning with the higher sense of self, or the sense of self that like we are all sort of on this planet together. And so a lot of the work sort of speaks to these ideas of us sort of all being one in a way, just with energy and frequencies and vibes and all of that. And so a lot of times I think that music has a huge influence on all of that, because we're all sort of like different frequencies or whatever. So that's probably where the idea of it being a song, like a cell song. So these kind of, the way cells sort of come together and separate, and that's all influenced by energetic stuff. And so also along the same lines as the Kundalini experience, this other piece is called Carbon Prison, and one of the practices, a Kriya is kind of the form that you follow for different results, and one of the Kriyas that I practiced this one time I thought was really fascinating, and it was about the anger that the soul feels for having like to be in the physical form. So that has a lot to do with what occurred in this painting, although it was a very intuitive process. I love the immediacy of it, and I actually chose both of these pieces for the palette, but also the immediacy of like, the touch of painting and everything. This is very immediate, and so, the black kind of speaks to the idea of like carbon, that we are all originate from carbon, and it was kind of accidental the way this kind of formulated, and just kind of became this sort of cage form. It's also a head, but also it's kind of like there's breasts there, so it's kind of like, we incarnate and, we choose this incarnation, but we are all on our journeys and have to deal with different biases, different cultural norms, different constructs, and it's all part of the journey and sort of like the struggle, and becomes a prison, I guess. That's kind of where that came from. I also chose this piece because it was part of a show in Boston last December called Transfixed at Gallery Berry in the South End of Boston. I was in the show with two other artists, and it was successful, and it's a great piece. It's very graphic, and again, it just, it's one of those pieces that was really immediate, and I love the process of painting, but I also love when something just happens and you're done and you can walk away. So that's what I have.
Awesome work, Tammy. Thank you so much. I just want to say really quickly how much I admire your sense of texture and surface. I know that a lot of this is really intuitive and kind of fluid, but you have this great sense of working back and forth with wet and dry media. And I looked through your website a little bit, and the thought behind this stuff is really fascinating. You mentioned collective imagination and sort of tapping into things like that through meditation, which I thought was really fascinating. And if we have any questions from the audience? Yes, Christine.
So I was wondering, what is Fabriano?
So that was, what is Fabriano paper?
Oh, it's the drawing paper. It's the brand Fabriano. It's an art brand.
It's a specific brand of rag paper. Cool. Yes.
That phrase, the anger, the soul as being invisible.
No, being stuck in a body, being.
I've never heard that before. That's amazing. So is that a part of your meditation routine, or is it something that you work with?
Well, finding stillness. So yoga is about finding that stillness, or exhausting the body to find that stillness, so that the mind can kind of relax, disconnect, and tap into the divine. So that's kind of the idea behind it, I think.
Yeah, it's very intense.
Yeah, that was a really, really cool turn of phrase.
There was a really good review on the show. It's in the Globe. The show's name is Transfixed, and actually there's a really great review on one of the paintings that's in my studio right now. But it was pretty cool. There were two other artists, and it was a nice show. But actually the painting that I have in my studio is very intense, and that was actually one of the remarks in the review, was intense. So yeah.
Yes.
Is the word corporeal opposite of ethereal? And is corporeal kind of what you mean when you track?
Well, core is actually body, C-O-R-P, and S in French is cool. So of the ether, the ethereal, yeah.
So the question was about corporeal versus ethereal, and it does seem like they're kind of opposite sides of the same coin, almost. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. All right. Next up, we have Ewa Liput. I hope I'm saying that right. Please correct me if not.
I agree that
So if you speak into the microphone right here, they'll hear you a lot better.
This is the actual prints of the vessel track, which is recorded on a plotter. And years ago, we keep this plotting on a paper, which I could relate and make these prints. Right now, it's they use the programs, computer programs, and you still can just work over them once you save the track. So some just have a few lines because generally the role of the fishing vessel is to go and search for a great catch, or sometimes when you find a good spot, then you can get more lines. And I find them interesting, and actually I started to relate to these lines, because actually I thought that by the steering the boat, I drew these lines on the ocean myself. So when I was out doing fishing, I just saved them because they were kind of my artwork when I was out. When I get back and work in a studio, I try to translate them to the paintings we have here. And the difference between this one, the instruments really keep this track quite accurate, and they are almost same lines, maybe just one on the top on another. But when I start to develop the paintings, which I have a lot, I can just like go around the whole this room, I imagine more how the other factors decide how you put this paint on the canvas, because you have the weather, you have the boat could drift. So all these things, it's very, recorded by me. They are oil paintings. I use also the wax. And they are cover my thoughts when you have out when you on the ocean. And what was interesting, usually the images of the tracks with the stormy weather, and start just a little bit with before you had the strong wind, you have a little bit of the mist, and the rain start to pouring, and this line, it's just very spontaneous. But when I did this painting, I thought about this line which are recorded and vessel when the vessel is out and do a fishing. So I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Ewa. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch. Is it oil or is there bleach? What do you use for?
This is the oil paintings, and I use also the wax to make the paint more smooth, because they came fast. They are not developed by the just working on an easel. And I'm interested in paintings which are large in size. Also, I paint by the whole body. I am very, disappointed if I have to just work on a small scale, which is, not very bad things, but it's also not in good things, because I saw the beautiful small artwork. This is just a matter of the scale, you know. It's like this painting I made when I was doing fishing, and I just relate myself for this, you know, the space, and for me they are small.
It's fascinating. These digital images, I think, are very cool, and it's sort of like you're making this work with yourself, like through your travels.
Yes.
So that's a big piece, but brought down to a different size. And this is really cool too, as like a journal sort of your travels. Beautiful. Any other questions?
I just want to comment. I get altarpiece.
Oh yeah, altarpiece vibes, sort of like a triptych from a church or something. Yes, David.
So do you create each panel separately in the same space, or is it like?
It's the idea of this paintings, because I had a larger in size, but it was difficult to transport. It was like, it's a 7-day vessel track. So it's like the idea of this plotting, it's just so you are able to repeat the toe or keep the line. But this painting to show when you have this outside factor like the weather, it's almost you are unable to keep this line. So it's everyone was developed separate, but everyone tried to make at least some of the repeating of the line you have on the first which you start. So this is just show that it's hard, very difficult to do it.
Are these digitally printed, you said?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I've never seen these all like this. I've seen them stacked up in our house.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
This is amazing.
This is the first time seeing them all together. Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, and our last artist of the night is Kim Berry. Hi, everybody. So I live in Mattapoisett. I'm a potter, a sculptor, and a painter. And I have my pottery studio, Claythroat Pottery, in Mattapoisett, where I do plant pots and sculpted tile. And I'm a member of Hatch Street Studios, so I have my studio up on the 4th floor. And I love to paint. I love to do pottery, but I just am like passionate about my painting. And I've lived in the South Coast for most of my life. I love nature. I love walking on the beach. You know, my pockets are always full of shells and things that I pick up when I'm, you know, kind of wandering in front of the ocean or in the ocean. And so my work is informed by the natural world around me, whether it's 3D or 2D. And when I work in 2D, I love painting with oil paints. I just love the richness of color and the kind of viscosity and just the way you can kind of manipulate it and you can build up a surface. So when I'm working with oil, I kind of have like a experience. Two different directions. They're kind of related because they're both based on observation. I really get excited by looking at objects or being in a place and responding to what I see or feel or whatever I'm experiencing. So this first painting here, if you could do the landscape first, is an example of one of my landscape pieces. And I like to do landscape, seascape, and I really enjoy setting up my easel and just taking in the experience of wherever I am and responding to it and kind of creating a sense of the energy of the day. So, it could be a windy fall, sunny day,
and that energy kind of energizes, it kind of goes through me and into my painting. It could be early morning fog by the seashore, and it could be cold, it could be hot. You know, all those things kind of come into what my experience is at the time. And the way that I hope to kind of imbue my painting with that experience is through the brush strokes, through color, through kind of the movement of the paint. You know, that kind of excites me, and I hope that the viewer can get a sense of the experience that I've had, you know, in that place, at that time, in that season. And it's just and the other thing about that experience is that things are constantly changing. And I love painting clouds because that, to me, is one of the bigger challenges, because, you know, you start in the morning, it could be completely cloudy, and then the sun starts to break through, and then blue sky peeks through. So you have to kind of capture what you want to take from that kind of changing moment. And it's very, very exciting. So, so this particular painting is actually a bit of an experiment for me, a little bit of a departure in that I worked from a photograph. And my husband and I were out in Western Mass this summer, and we went to the Clark Museum, and we were sitting, and this beautiful landscape, you know, was, you know, in front of us while we were eating. And one of the things that struck me by this view, about this view, is that, you know, we live in a very flat area, and there's not a lot of photography, but I really enjoyed a couple of things. One was the way this hill was kind of like a backdrop for these trees, and then it led to the sky, and then the contrast of the bright, bright green grass and the rich shadows. So, so that was, you know, kind of my motivation for this painting, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I will paint more from photographs, but I didn't get to chase the sky, so to speak. The other direction that I really enjoy is working in my studio up on the 4th floor. And again, I work from observation. So I'll bring in fruits and vegetables. Sometimes I'll bring flowers. I'll bring in, you know, shells. Of course, shells are a big part of what I use for subject matter. And, you know, I like the broken shells as well as the perfect shells. And the broken shells, to me, give almost like a natural kind of abstraction. You know, they already have, like, you know, kind of abstracted edges, and they can be very exciting to paint. And like a conch shell that has a hole in it, it invites you into the inside, and you can have that additional experience of like looking through and looking into an object, a natural object. But one of my favorite subjects are the coal hogs, mussel shells that with a hinge that are still hinged. So I actually brought some of my models, my favorite models, and so you can see, and of course, garlic is my favorite thing. So this garlic is actually desiccated. I've had it for 2 years, and it's just still here. But you can see that these are shells that are still intact and connected. And there's something about the fragility of that connection, and then the kind of almost like kind of welcoming shape. You know, it kind of invites the viewer, it invites me as the artist to look into the shell. And when I look into a shell, like if you were to close your eyes and think, oh, what color is a coal hog? You'd be like, oh, it's white and it's gray. But when I look into a coal hog, I see a lot of color. I just do. And so with my painting, with all my painting, I think I enjoy pushing the color. And I also like to kind of break up the subject matter into color shapes. And so from a distance, you know, you probably see that coal hog as being pretty tight. But if you come up close, actually in the frame, you can see that there are really color shapes that build the interior and exterior and structure of the painting. And so I really kind of enjoy that process. And the other thing that I like to do, sometimes I work with palette knife, and I'll kind of manipulate the paint to kind of work around the curve of the form, and that also is very satisfying. So, thank you. Any questions?
I don't have any questions myself, but I'd be happy to take questions from the audience. Yes.
I did. That was the thing. I sent the picture up there, and then I was like, you know what, I really want to go into this painting again. So yes, I did, and that, you have a very good eye.
Good eye, yeah.
Because it's like, you know, when you're a painter, sometimes you think something's done, and you feel like that's it, and then you'll go in a day or two later, and you'll be like, oh no, I see something. And so then you go back in, and sometimes it's successful, and sometimes it's not. Yes.
It's beautiful that you in the shadow you got the color.
Oh, thank you.
And just walk outside. They are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's something that artists and painters in particular really notice about things that, you know, that other people might not, is that there's so much color in everyday things and in shadows in particular, like vibrant colors. These are lovely, by the way. I don't think I've really seen many of your landscapes before, but I've seen like studies that you've done of things like peppers, garlic. I love those, like very intimate studies. And I think your application of paint is really interesting as well.
Yeah, I like to push it around.
Yeah, you can definitely see those brush strokes and that like thick application.
It's all wet on wet. I don't wait for it to dry.
Yeah.
Keep working.
Very cool. Any more questions for Kim? All right. Thank you so much. All right, so we went over on time today, but we can take about 5 minutes to mingle, ask questions, find an artist, ask them a question, tell them you like their work. We always love to hear it. We always appreciate it.
If people have announcements about places that you're going to be presenting your artwork.
Yeah, if you have anything you'd like to plug, if your work is somewhere locally and you'd like us all to see it, if you want us to see your website, let me know and come right on up.